In the book, The Truth Agenda, we explore a widely held hypothesis in certain quarters that the world might be controlled by a powerful ruling elite, which puts its own narrow interests and convictions above ours through manipulation and engineered global crises to help bring about an Orwellian-style One World Government. With so many conspiracy theories out there, it's hard to keep track of them all. Welcome to What We Know, where we try to uncover the histories and mysteries of the world by presenting all different theories out there, and the only narrative we push is this. Here's what we know, make up your own mind. The book also considers the possibility that our planet is about to undergo a huge change, social, spiritual, or cosmological, something seemingly anticipated by several ancient cultures around the world in the now renowned 2012 prophecies. The exploration of these ideas throws up disturbing possibilities and more pieces of evidence to support them than is entirely comfortable. However, if all that the most extreme speculation achieves is to help prevent such a grim picture from reaching full fruition, then it will have served a useful purpose. It is also crucial that a note of optimism is struck. An often valid criticism of conspiracy theorists or truth seekers is that their fevered investigations into humankind's worst nightmares can leave some listeners feeling more fearful, and risks driving them into a state of disempowered paralysis, putting up the shutters when what is needed is engagement. Yet the unavoidable truth is that looking at a potentially tough situation in the eye does mean facing up to disturbing realities that may have been swept under the carpet, for they might require urgent action. Lifting the blindfold even just a little means that we might not run into the approaching wall at such a great velocity. If the idea of a secretive but all-pervading cabal running the world leaves some feeling shocked, the act of simply contemplating such an idea may itself spark a new awakening of consciousness. What psychologically motivates this elite, however? What kinds of minds are we really dealing with? How can we attempt to understand them so that solutions and strategies for dealing with their actions may become clearer? The elite and its motivations. Something too often missed in all the conspiracy speculation is the realization that if we are being governed by a powerful cabal trying to twist the world to its own ends, then we are still essentially dealing with fellow human beings. Well, putting aside the ET/reptilian bloodline theories for a moment. Like every other person on the planet, they must have physical, social, and emotional needs, even if the latter faculty may be too easily set aside in the kind of mind that would plan a type of scenario. That is, an event widely suspected to have been deliberately staged by Western sources as a part of a march toward the New World Order. The personalities involved must have loved ones of their own, and must experience thoughts, feelings, and some kind of care in at least some directions. They also, like most of us in our lives, probably think they're doing the right thing, however much we may see their schemes as misguided. And this is an important point. We all have reasons for doing what we do, and can often justify actions to ourselves in the face of serious challenges from the outside. Hard though it may be to comprehend, the motivation of those who might think that wiping out their own people would be a positive move, or who believe that planning wars and economic breakdowns to effect the creation of a unifying world government is an acceptable strategy. The fact is that many seemingly well-intentioned visionaries throughout history have voiced the need for such approaches. This does not make them right, of course, but there is plainly a significant, if small, seam of humanity that believes a bigger picture should be put before the needs of the masses. Those who have expressed support for eugenics and depopulation strategies, for instance, often have deep-seated environmental concerns or feel strongly that we have lost our balance with nature and must put the planet's future ahead of the requirements of the common people. One of the most prominent promoters of the term New World Order was the famous and much-revered writer H.G. Wells, who believed passionately that the only answer to global strife would be the creation of the eponymous hierarchy, actively proposing it in his 1940 book, The New World Order. This is clearly not a modern concept, and has roots going back even further than Wells's idealistic version of it. Some believe both world wars were deliberately coordinated, or at least used, to help bring about a mandate for world government. As early as 1913, writing in his book, The New Freedom, President Woodrow Wilson made it clear that some formidable force already underpinned the commercial and probably political infrastructure of the USA. Some of the biggest men in the US, in the field of commerce and manufacturing, are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power so organized somewhere, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. What is striking in H.G. Wells's writings, however, is his sense of excitement and enthusiasm for the idea of a dominating collective that would put all to rights and avert the disastrous extinction of mankind. There is no sense of negative intention, nor a Malthusian dislike for humanity. Yet at the same time, Wells was an advocate of eugenics. Many find this concept entirely repugnant. But here's the paradox. The very kinds of people truth seekers tend to single out as the enemies of humanity very likely see themselves as its saviors. It's all a matter of perspective and of where one chooses to draw the moral line. The philosopher Bertrand Russell openly accepted the inevitability of a controlling one world government, founded on the basis of hard scientific values, and was disturbingly frank about the culture that would result. Writing in his 1953 book, The Impact of Science on Society, he states, quote, "Diet, injections, and injunctions will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable, and any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. Gradually, by selective breeding, the congenital differences between rulers and the ruled will increase until they become almost different species. A revolt of the plebes would become as unthinkable as an organized insurrection of sheep against the practice of eating mutton." End quote. On the surface, Russell's thoughts appear to encourage such a world rather than condemn it. And such thinking seems outrageous, even if it does come close to identifying the very philosophy that may now be actively shaping our society. However, although it seems difficult, almost distasteful for some to contemplate, there is a thought to be considered here. What if such thinking were definitively shown to be right? What if humankind's very survival did rest on the notion of more control, not less? What if the choice were demonstrated to be between total destruction through overpopulation, pollution, and overstretched resources, or a selectively bred, closely monitored world that regulated itself and continued on perpetually? What if an anarchy-ridden post-2012 apocalypse society could be shown to stand no real chance of survival, whereas a tightly controlled, disciplinarian civilization would? Uncomfortably so, in the light of the world's current challenging issues, it can be seen, at least to a small extent, how arguments could be made in these directions when looked at from a particular viewpoint. The problem comes, as ever, with the massive issue of who gets to decide. Those in comfortable circumstances looking down from on high must inevitably see things rather differently to those scraping an existence lower down on the rungs at their mercy. We already hold the power of genetic manipulation in our hands, and it will not be too long before required characteristics of children will be able to be routinely selected and engineered. Also, with lifespans ever increasing and our understanding of tissue and brain cell regeneration growing by the year, how long will it be before life can be sustained indefinitely? When that occurs, the population problem will clearly explode if unlimited access to such power is allowed. Assuming, of course, that the majority of humankind is permitted to survive in the first place, depopulation conspiracy theories are rife. A world of immortals would risk stagnation, but also domination from those who attained the status of immortality first. They would effectively decide who would be offered the gift from there on, and in the end, the gene pool would almost certainly be controlled by such authorities, the new eugenics having arrived through the back door. These issues are already reality, not dystopian fiction. The power of genetic engineering, which is currently changing our food, both animal and vegetable, arguably for better or worse, and thus our entire ecosystem. As spliced and altered genes make their way into nature through pollination and crossbreeding, it means that humankind has already taken the entire planet's evolutionary destiny into its own hands, and there is no going back. So, do those calling the shots have the moral compass to carry such a huge responsibility? Can they serve as the quote-unquote gods that they are setting themselves up to be? In a society of angels, perhaps a charter of rigid regulation, surveillance, and genetic population control could be applied with compassion and with the wide agreement of a common consensus. But both laughably and sadly, we are nowhere near such a state of being. With the motivation of those governing our world today clearly in question, it seems impossible that the kinds of agendas that many feel the ruling elite has implemented could work in any other way than being a simple attack on the larger percentage of humankind. Without common consensus, whatever the supposedly good intentions that might exist somewhere behind the plans, any attempt to regulate the world by coercion and draconian measures remains an immoral one. Inherent deception. The problem with global cover-ups is that they arrive and build up, as deception does so often for all of us, through a lack of honesty largely sparked by the fear of what people might think or do if they were to perceive the true vulnerability within. The elite appears to fear us and our reactions as much as we may fear them. Otherwise, they would have no need to manipulate or control. Many disingenuous actions are born of their inner psychosis, a lack of trust that the other people will understand. Our leaders appear to have got so used to playing deceptive games that they cannot now operate any other strategy. As everything from the banking system to government administration now appears to be based all on subterfuge. And right now, we are clearly not trusted by those affecting our lives so strongly, and as a result, we do not trust them. Not that some of the elite would even be remotely bothered about what any of us thinks of their actions. For those who feel that caveats to explain such motivation is too generous to people who maim, kill, and deceive to get their way for whatever reason, it should be noted that there do also appear to be those pulling the strings who simply seek power for power's sake. The lessons of history tell us that selfishness, greed, and excited bloodlust cannot be ruled out as prime movers in some cases at least, and to acknowledge the not insubstantial suspicion of a quote-unquote reptilian agenda, if it were to turn out that this highly exclusive club was indeed the result of a dominating extraterrestrial gene seeded eons ago, as some believe based on ancient myths, and being exploited and or activated by celestial visitors today, then it admittedly might explain why concern for the needs of humanity appears to be as low down the list of its priorities as our general concern for the welfare of livestock today. As for what kind of people may comprise the global elite, the well-intentioned and the not-so-well-intentioned, most likely we are largely dealing with high-ranking politicians, academics, intellectuals, as with Wells and Russell, monarchies, and very rich and influential families, with a mixture of political, religious, and occult undercurrents. So, in other words, all the usual suspects. Numerous books and websites go into those details, so there is little need to explore it here. Now, how much of that grand plan all of them know, and whether there are pyramids within pyramids amongst even the power structures near the top, is a completely different matter. Factions within factions. The presumption is often made that the very existence of a ruling elite means that those involved must be all-powerful and of one mind, accurately manipulating domino events that hit the required spot every time, all to a predetermined agenda. But this may apportion them an unwarranted infallibility. There is evidence to show that there are factions and disputes within the echelons of those with great influence over our lives. After all, the world is a big and complex place. Even with a general agreement on how it should move forward, the pressures of regional needs and personal biases are almost certain to blur the clarity of purpose from time to time. Going on the word that does sneak out from Bilderberg meetings and the such like, it seems that as many disagreements, compromises, and negotiations arise there as with any supposedly democratic government. If this weren't the case, the meetings would not presumably need to take place, because everything would already be pre-orchestrated. And as just about any other organization, there is a pecking order to be considered. It's doubtful that all of those in on a global conspiracy seeking centralized control would be party to every machination, and certain players may themselves be manipulated from within without realizing it. For example, from the outside, it appears that British ex-Prime Minister Gordon Brown, for all of his many references to creating a new world order, the argument could be made that he seemed destined to be a fall guy from the start, set up to come to power just as the world economy took a tumble. The question is, did Brown know the full plan? Was he someone faithfully playing a game with a known outcome of outward failure while secretly ensuring success in an agenda of weakening the UK on the world stage to quicken a move towards a one world government? Or did he instead cling on in the genuine belief that all would come right and that he would one day be hailed as a political hero? Likewise, when Bill Clinton found himself under threat of impeachment following the Monica Lewinsky sex scandal, was this all part of some contrived drama, or a sign of factions within factions very genuinely trying to remove him after an unplanned gaffe? And did Richard Nixon go rogue, or was he just playing a pre-auditioned role? On a smaller level, when a man in the crowd died after being pushed to the ground by a policeman during the 2009 G20 protests in London, it took all the seemingly contrived focus away from images of a few people smashing a bank window, and suddenly all the headlines became howls of police brutality. Was this an ongoing twist to deliberately stir unrest? Or was it, as many suspect, something going unexpectedly wrong, tragically horrible, and changing the script? Does every war and false flag terror attack really go to plan? Or is there as much chance involved as conspiracy? How organized, then, is this global elite? And is it really as united as some truth seekers give it credit for? The evidence suggests that there are cracks in the armor and disagreements within, and weaknesses and unpredictable elements always arise in any grand plan. This offers hope. The foibles of human nature and the sheer universality of chaos theory may ensure that unexpected events and peculiar sidetracks undermine the apparent solidity of the control agenda just when they are least expected. We could, therefore, be dealing with something far less coordinated than feared. Indeed, the wide truth-seeker presumption of the elite's potency may make it seem more of a problem than it really is. But can we take the chance of becoming complacent? It's clear that certain events and trends do seem to be part of an unfolding pattern that suggests an attempt to engineer a mandate for centralized power. While we must not become petrified to inaction by this, nor, however, should we take the opposite risk of assuming that there is no real threat, even if the conspirators are found to be less competent than some believe. Either way, it is important at the very least to call attention to the appalling deeds committed by those at least trying to be an all-powerful force. Consent by apathy. If plans for world domination are being laid on any level, a simple fact needs to be recognized, that it only goes on because we collectively allow it. Even with obvious governmental deception such as the weapons of mass destruction debacle in Iraq, such things only continue to occur as widely as they do because too few people stand solidly against them or fully call their leaders into account. We have allowed apathy and the distractions of apparent comfort, trivia, and entertainment to hold us in our armchairs in the hope that anything dark out there will remedy itself in due course without our input, energetically or even electorally. Voter turnouts for Western elections, whatever they are worth, are generally perilously low. By having become so disconnected with what goes on around us in our names, we have not stood up in our collective power, and are therefore just as responsible as any global elite for having created the world that we live in today. With the consent granted by our passivity, we have watched obvious lies and manipulations take away our strength, resolve, and liberty, and have done little or nothing about it. As such, we have given away our personal responsibility. The energy spent complaining loudly but emptily in bars and backyards about the shortcomings of today's society, if applied in a more proactive and positive direction, could be used to offset the very things being complained about. The problem is that we have been trained to think that we cannot make a difference, when in truth we can. especially when we match the tangible power of the collective mind with the practical rewards of direct action, as the author explores more in The Truth Agenda. Speaking out, much of the awakening process that has begun has come from the kind of people drawn to be part of the truth-seeking community. Unfortunately, their often unseen efforts are generally rewarded by undeserved ridicule and sidelining by a culture that has shut its eyes and ears to anything but the skewed vision that it is fed by those who prefer to keep us dumb. People who question the status quo are easily neutered in the mainstream by being branded with false wacko stereotypes created by a media that is all too often either itself controlled, fearful, or just lazily stupid. Truth-seeker enthusiasm does allow things to spill over into fanaticism, and lack of discernment sometimes, no doubt, but the fact is that there are absolutely vital questions and observations being raised by very reasonable, normal people, which could make a real and positive difference to people's lives if ever given a chance. It doesn't take long for the average person to see through manipulation once obvious anomalies are pointed out. Assuming the masses will always be dumb may be an arrogant and huge mistake on part of our masters. When discussed in an accessible and objective way, the concept of a ruling global elite, which believes that some kind of catastrophic cosmological or climactic change may be imminent, and has thus been implementing a regime of draconian restrictions by nefarious means to ensure it retains control during and after chaos, is nowhere near as far-fetched as it may at first seem. It can all be made to sound credible when expressed in balanced tones and when sensible evidence is presented. And too often the community hurts itself. Tone is important. Extreme conspiracy dogma, passionately but indiscriminately shouted, can repel potential support and plays into the hands of the mainstream's characterization of all alternative thinkers as uneducated fanatics. Those with the power of insight who can rise above this have a responsibility to convey a user-friendly overview of the control agenda. Successful outreach requires initial moderation and compassion. Newcomers may be confused by all the many complex sources of information out there, and they may shrink away from the at first disturbing idea of a manipulative ruling elite if not properly approached. The uncertain era we live in now, with glimpses of the truth shining in through the cracks, provides a unique opportunity for those with the insights to offer another view of the world while they can. There may be more than one reason why a world of centralized control would be desired by a ruling elite, and we cannot fully presume to understand from the outside. But no strategy that imposes an undeclared agenda without transparency or choice can be right, or moral, or ethic, and any regime of underhanded manipulation must be resisted. To resist successfully, however, those with awareness must hold on to the optimism and strike an appropriate tone if they are to be listened to and people awakened so that a self-elected and questionable minority's vision for this world is not allowed to ride roughshod over the needs of everyday people. No elite of any kind can be infallible, and this offers true hope for the future. That is, if enough people can rise above their fears and speak out loudly and clearly.
If you enjoy this video and want to see more like it, please consider subscribing to us and hitting the like button. Feel free to write a comment below and suggest which theory you want to see next. If you'd like to further support this channel, please consider joining. Our membership link will be found in the description box below. We appreciate your support, and as always, thanks for watching.